Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back, gang, to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Now, if you're like me and you're enjoying shows like Westworld and Silicon Valley at the moment, you'll also do everything within your power to avoid adverts at all costs. Now, when watching TV, maybe you opt for Netflix or record a show and then start watching it 20 minutes in, just so you can fast forward the ads or avoid the adverts. Now, while we congratulate ourselves on being so savvy and maybe even complain that the current ad ecosystem is completely broken, we also need to realise that the content that we all enjoy essentially needs somebody to pick up the tab. I mean, that's how everything works, right? So I recently came across a company called Mirriad. Now, they're doing things entirely different, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one. So buckle up and hold on tight, as it's time to beam your ears all the way to London so we can speak with Mark Popkiewicz. He's the CEO of Mirriad, and he's going to talk about his in-video advertising technology that actually blends advertising into video content and offers scalable, targeted, measurable ad solution that cannot be blocked or skipped. And it's not a bad thing. I think you'll love this one. So let's get Mark onto the show now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Certainly. My name's Mark Popkiewicz. I'm Chief Executive of Mirriad Advertising. And I guess it's in the name, isn't it, Neil? But we are a technology business bringing new kinds of advertising to particularly video consumers of professionally produced entertainment on TV and online.
Well, my understanding was, before speaking to you today, was Mirriad is a video advertising technology company that naturally blends advertising into video content and also offers a scalable, targeted, measurable ad solution that cannot be blocked or skipped. But can you tell me a little bit more about what Mirriad is, what problems you solve for your clients, and also what makes it unique from other solutions out there?
So I'm sure if you or any of the listeners to this podcast have watched TV or been online, other than the Netflixes or Amazon Primes, you'll have experienced advertising in the middle of your show. So you're watching whatever it may be, your favorite TV show. You could be online listening to a music video, and the video advertising will pop up. Video ads will either start at the beginning of your experience or will break up your experience with various messages from various advertisers. And that was a formula that worked really well in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and some argue works well now. But our appetite for interruptive advertising is waning. And advertisers know this. Just sticking more ads into our entertainment experience we believe is not the way to go. There's a place for them, but in certain parts of the world, you may have to endure 8 or 10 or even 12 video ads before you even get into the show you want to watch. So we were interested in that phenomenon when we started developing the technology for this business several years ago. And there was another phenomenon we were interested in particular, which was brands, the advertisers, wanting to spend increasing amounts of money being involved with the content that we watch. So the idea was, if you become part of the show, it may be a better win-win for the audience experience, but also for the advertiser and the people who make the shows, compared to just sticking more and more ads into the experience and disrupting our entertainment. And that's a trend that's grown and grown and grown over the decades, as it happens. But it's come to a point where we think that the idea of blending advertising and content seamlessly is a really good solution for everybody, providing it's seamless. So several years ago, we started developing the technology to do just that. Some people think of it in the early days as a form of product placement, but we've moved way beyond that. And now we have very sophisticated technology which can analyze TV shows or online video, can find places in natural, original content that are relevant to particular brands and categories. And then we have the power to insert images into those places that we find in video. So it could be products or signage, and usually both, so that they look completely natural within the context of the show, but are in fact a form of advertising. Now, we're used to that because, we've all grown up with movies that have products in them, not least, everybody's aware of the James Bond idea. But we've turned this into a scalable advertising medium where, you can now as an advertiser integrate your brand, insert it into content, and perhaps a lot of it, across a whole broad range of content to reach your target audience. But at the same time, we manage the balance of, making sure that the number of ads, if you like, appearing in the show are completely, comfortable from an audience editorial point of view. So you're not going to find lots and lots of products suddenly cascading into your experience. You'll find ads in all the right places. An outdoor scene could have a billboard, for example, containing a message from an advertiser, just like you would in real life. Or you could be watching a scene which has a kitchen, for example. You'll find products that are completely natural for kitchens, and so on and so forth. So the ads are completely relevant to the content. Search has shown are completely, are very well accepted by the audience because, we're used to seeing products in the real world, in real life situations. But we do this in a very managed, scalable way.
Yeah, there's a fine balance to get it right, isn't there? I mean, we've all seen shows where suddenly everyone's got a Windows Surface device, They're quite obvious, aren't they, some ways of doing it?
Well, it's always interesting getting the balance right. In our case, the advertising is sold in the form of 10-second ad units. So 10 seconds of exposure of a particular brand, product or signage constitutes one ad unit. And so in a typical 30-minute show, you might find, 1, 2, or 3 ad units. So in terms of the sort of ratio between the content that you watch and the number of these exposures that you see, it's very, very light. So to the audience, it's not intrusive in any way. And in fact, the research that we've done around audiences' reaction, particularly here in the UK, was that audiences actually react very positively to it because we all know that there are brands all around us. We often relate to those brands. I bet in the studio or wherever you are right now, you've probably got a laptop, you've probably got a screen, you've probably got a mobile phone next to you. You may even have, some beverage products or whatnot. The fact is we live with brands. So there's nothing unnatural or wrong about putting brands into scenes. That's just a normal sort of reflection of everyday life. But to your point, the balance has to be right. And we manage that very carefully.
So just to help anyone listening at home there visualise how you bring value to your clients, can you walk me through, I think one I read about recently was the Tangesh in-video advertising campaign and the problems that they came to you with, and also how you work with them to reach those goals?
Yeah, sure. So look, this particular one is the Tangesh campaign. It's the largest that's been run to date in the world by anyone as far as we're aware. And this is for a company in China that produces, actually their product is selling car leasing services to their audience, their target customers. And what they wanted to do in China was reach a younger audience. They wanted to connect to younger drivers, and they have a particular mobile app which they believe is helpful to those younger drivers as they may want to lease or rent cars and so on. Now, China is a huge market and video consumption is just rife. I mean, there are multiple platforms like YouTube, all competing within that market, all reaching billions of people every day, or billions of impressions every day. So Tangesh wanted to reach a large number of young drivers and tell those drivers about a new mobile app that they believe will be helpful to those younger drivers when they engage with their car leasing, when they start leasing cars. So they came to us and said, okay, we would like to reach just a little shy of 1 billion impressions. That's around 800 million impressions. That's views. And we would like to communicate to our audience through the shows that they like watching, which in this case was over 20 different shows. That's multiple episodes of each, but like 20 different series. And we would like you to insert our advertising, which was signage, or even physical products, which are, for example, there could be ads running on TV screens naturally within the content, or even in this particular case, we had branded products like cushions, believe it or not. So across this 20 plus shows with several hundred episodes, we inserted those Mirriad ad units, those in-video ad units containing relevant imagery, the brand message, as well as physical manifestations of the product into the show. And we reached an audience of hundreds of millions. We achieved 800 million impressions in a few months and delivered absolutely phenomenal results for the advertiser. So, they saw uplifts in engagement from their audience that they would otherwise find very hard to achieve. But the really cool thing for me was that the experience for the audience was great. They didn't have to sit through dozens of ads ahead of their content. The ads were naturally in the content that they are experiencing, and we saw that reflected in the kind of YouTube, the social traffic on WeChat and other social networks in China, where there was a lot of excitement around the campaign because people were seeing the ads appear naturally within the content, but realized that those ads were appearing consistently across a range of content. So actually, a lot of oohs and ahs and a lot of positive response from the audience, which again is great for the brand because no brand wants to alienate their audience or make their audience feel uncomfortable about any particular advertising campaign. In fact, it's quite the reverse. Audiences seem to react extremely well. So very big campaign, delivering across a large amount of content to a very, very large audience.
So without revealing the secret ingredient to your magic sauce there, I mean, what is the technology behind Mirriad and how does it actually work?
Well, Mirriad is an eclectic mix of technologies. There's not one technology that does it all. And that's what makes it very exciting for me as a technologist. It has computer vision science, the sort of technology that we sometimes see in the research being done into self-driving cars. There's AI and machine learning. So this is the sort of technology that you might use to parse a lot of data. The thing about video is that you have an awful lot of data produced in and around video, which needs to be processed very quickly. And we do that in the cloud these days. But machine learning plays a very valuable role in helping us understand that content. So, for example, we use a machine learning algorithm which helps us analyze shows in volume and identify places. So, the system will run lots and lots and lots of video files and will tell you where there are kitchens and bathrooms and where people are driving cars and when there are outdoor scenes. And it does that completely automatically. And that's very important to us because when we put advertising into shows, we're looking for those sorts of places because, where the ad appears has to be contextually relevant to the scene. So finding scenes is very powerful. And then we use a lot of technology to manage data because with hundreds or thousands of video files all being analyzed in this way, you have to collate all the data you produce and ultimately make that data available as information to the advertisers. So if I'm an advertiser, I want to reach a certain audience at a certain time with a certain brand, we have to dive into a large database of knowledge around the different content that's available potentially for that advertiser and connect that content to the advertiser's proposition in the form of a plan. We actually call it a media plan. And then ultimately you have to, once you've connected the right plan to the right advertiser and you've transacted, the advertiser has bought that inventory or that advertising space, then we go on to deliver that advertising using another range of computer vision technologies which allow us to insert those new images into existing videos so that they look like they were always there. And then ultimately we report against all that. So it's a pretty sophisticated range of technologies used end to end in that process.
So with Fox Network and NBC, you're all planning to cut back on those prime time ads that we've talked about and that system that's not working, combined with the fact that new browsers now, such as Brave, making waves, are advertisers concerned with how quickly that landscape is changing and a lot of people that you're speaking with there? So
advertisers are in a quandary today. When I read the press, even though it's in my own industry, around the challenges advertisers are having with some of the new advertising solutions that are available out there, there are challenges, and there are challenges around data transparency, and there's a lot of data, but is there enough real information? Is it are we all measuring the right things? A very well-known marketer spoke to me a few weeks ago and said, look, there's so much data, we've lost the wood for the trees. We just want honest, reliable information about how our campaigns are going or who we should be messaging to and how people feel about our ads. So I think that the advertising world has sort of entered over the last few months a really difficult arena, which is very combative between the advertisers and the media owners around the nature of data and also how best to reach that target audience without alienating it. At the end of the day, if you're an advertiser, the last thing you want to do is to annoy your audience. So we're seeing there's a very important moment that we're at now where I think advertisers are considering very carefully how best to do that. And doing what we do, which is we think is a win-win, which is not pushing away audiences with overwhelming heaps of advertising, but actually making the advertising integral to your entertainment experience, is one of the things we can do to kind of get the best kind of relationship between the advertiser and the audience that you can, and help keep that relationship going forwards, which again, another thing that advertisers very much want to be able to do. So timing could not be better at a time where it's not just these two platforms, but we're seeing it all around the world where we operate. The media owners, the distributors who make this advertising inventory available are now very concerned about churning away audiences with too big an ad load, or finding that some of the budgets that they were used to historically are eking away towards other less intrusive, perhaps even more powerful forms of advertising.
Now, I did speak to you for a few minutes before we started recording today's podcast, so I know you're an early adopter of tech. So I've got to ask, are there any aspects of the industry or indeed future tech trends that particularly excite you at the moment?
Well, there's a lot of technology out there, and I've worked my entire career in the technology space, and every so often you come across a time where the confluence of lots of emerging technologies kind of really starts to bite. And what I mean is we see step changes in our experiences as consumers in technology, not through one technology coming to fruition, but many coming together at the same time. And so the thing that interests me right now is where we are with, and I loosely call it artificial intelligence, but particularly machine learning and algorithmic technologies, coupled with almost unlimited processing power in the cloud. So you have the sort of perfect opportunity, the combination of virtually limitless processing meets these very, very powerful technologies in processing very, very large amounts of data and really creating insights that were hitherto not possible. So, for me in the world of video, having the ability to kind of use that processing power with these wonderful new tools means that we can do things like we are doing. But I also think that there are tremendous applications that go behind, well beyond the self-driving car, which is in the headlines every few days, probably more for its notoriety than anything else. But we know that these technologies are going to bring lots of good things to us, but we have to be careful as well, because these technologies can be dangerous as well, but we have to make sure we get that balance right.
Now, millennials are now the largest generation in the workplace now, and this is only going to continue to grow, but we also have Gen Z waiting in the wings. I mean, how do you think that's going to change advertising and also what you guys do?
Well, look, I have two children, and I learn more from them than I do from most of the marketing research data that I read on a weekly basis. I'm just fascinated by the way they go about using technologies in a way that would have been alien to me. So, for example, doing your homework on a mobile phone. I mean, who'd have thought? I don't know if you're a parent or how many parents are listening to this show, but the natural instinct is to stop your children from, working out their sums on their mobile phone, researching their subject on Google on their mobile phone, and sit down with a bit of paper and a book. But they don't, and actually they're doing very well. That they really hone in to where the value is with these kinds of technologies that perhaps seem alien to us. Now, I think we need to learn equally well in the way they're consuming advertising. I actually think that millennials and Gen Z are tolerant of advertising, but they're tolerant to a different kind of advertising, to say the sort of advertising that we grew up with. So having the experience of an advert being integral to your experience of the entertainment. And I don't just mean in our case. For example, take computer gaming or other forms of entertainment. To them, I think is a way to go. That there is, especially if it means free. which certainly appeals to my oldest sons because they are both students. So it's a price worth paying. But, it's got to be relevant to their lifestyles. It's got to be targeted, as we might call it in the industry. And providing you kind of stick to those rules and make the advertising non-intrusive and beneficial to the experience, I think you're going to be on a winning formula. So advertising is here to stay. It's an important part of the economics of content, but making it part of your experience and not a counterpoint, in other words, intrusive to your experience, is, I think, vital for the next generation of advertising technologies out there.
Now, the world of advertising really does seem to have moved away from the old days of and even product placement. But now they're even buying storylines in TV shows. I don't know if you saw this, but there's a US show called Blackish, and it saw a character discussing an ad campaign by Procter & Gamble right in the show. But we did mention it earlier. I mean, do you really think getting that right balance is so important? And could tech-savvy audiences equally turn their back on the show if they spot an instance like that and take offence?
Well, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there are lines to be drawn in any form of advertising, whether it's, immersive or integral to the content. I mean, ultimately, when the show becomes an ad, you're back to square one. So I think whatever advertising there is has to be totally complementary and justified editorially. So if you're going to, in that particular case, talk about, a campaign by Procter & Gamble, it'll work if the script makes that discussion completely relevant. Where I think the hairs stand on the back of our necks and we get irate is where you feel that the advertising has been forced into the narrative. So it's got to have the right balance and it's got to be relevant. In our case, we insert ourselves into the visual narrative rather than have people change scripts. And I think where you start changing a script in a show, I think that's always dangerous territory, because you're probably moving away from the vision of the creator of the show somewhat and asking them to kind of divert into this other space, which is less about entertainment and more about, I guess the financials behind the show. So it's always dangerous territory. Now, some people get that very right. We know when it's right, but we also know when it's wrong. There was an example, for example, in James Bond recently, where James Bond holds his Omega watch up to the camera virtually, and there's a discourse around, it's an Omega, not the other one. And we sort of cringe, but we accept it because it's sort of part of the formula that is James Bond these days. But I think there are many, many examples where that doesn't work. In our case, it works because we are in the visual narrative and we use an awful lot of technology and process to make sure that it's the right brand in the right place every time. And we take away this kind of temptation to take over the scene with some form of advertising where I think it can become risky. Doesn't always not work, but that there are instances we can all think of. So get the balance right. And in our case, use technology to help you do that, and you're in a good place. Get too carried away, and you're going to start annoying some of those viewers.
So is there anything else that you can share with us today about your grand vision or your future plans and how you're going to increase that visual narrative?
Yeah, I mean, our goal is relatively straightforward. It is to, at the one end, have access to a lot of content, a lot of video content. There's never been so much video content consumed as there is today. The whole concept of binge watching is only a few years old, but it all has to be paid for somehow. And, the cost of producing content aren't really falling, especially if it's high production value, high quality content, the sort of stuff that we really enjoy. So our goal is very simple, is to, at one end, have access to a lot of that content, provide a new revenue stream back to those content producers and their distributors so they can keep on creating this great stuff. At the other end of the game, we want to be able to connect our platform to those advertisers who really need to start connecting to Gen Z and the millennials, but also us, and people like me who, still watch video commercials, but I have a low threshold for too many ads. And frankly, I react really well if the ads are integral to my experience, providing they fit and the balance is right. So really, it's on what we call the demand side. The advertisers is making sure there's enough inventory available and on the content producer side, making sure we have access to some of this great content so that we can offer it to the advertisers and get that, and connect. So that's really what we're about.
Excellent. Well, before I let you go, could I just ask that you remind anyone listening of where they can find you guys online, and equally contact a member of your team if they've got any questions after our conversation today?
Of course. So you can find us online at www.mirriad, that's MIRRIAD.com.
Well, like yourself, I've got a very low threshold of adverts, and I will do everything within my power to avoid watching them. I'll even stop watching a live TV show for 20 minutes and then record it and catch up so I can fast forward the adverts along the way. So it's clearly that system's not working. But like you say, this content needs to be paid for. There's a lot of costs involved there. So I love what you're doing there and how you're doing something completely different. It's fantastic. So a big thank you for coming on today.
Marvellous. Thanks for your time, Neil.
I love the concept behind, because I don't want to see ads. I will always skip them. And product placement is too obvious, a little bit lazy, especially when every single person in the same TV show or the same movie all have the exact same Windows Surface or Apple MacBook. Because life's not like that, is it? Families will have a mixture of Apple and Android smartphones and a variety of tablets across many brands. Isn't it time that any product featured in a show or movie actually reflected that? And is it really a bad thing if it's done tastefully and if it's done right? I mean, sure, nobody wants to see a plotline of an episode built entirely around a product, and we all know that there are some companies out there that will be wanting to play that game. But then I also think that tech-savvy audiences and anyone that has studied media will spot that stuff a mile away and tune out instantly, making that kind of approach completely counterproductive. But everything that Mark spoke about there sounds like the right way of doing things to me. It's subtle and it reflects our society. But what are your thoughts? Does it blur the line too much between art and ads? Or is it a sensible way to help finance the entertainment that we love? I'm really interested in which way you're all going to side on this one, and suspect it might split the camp a little. But hey, debate is healthy, so I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. Tweet me at Neil C. Hughes. I genuinely enjoyed today's conversation. I think it was a great new way to tackle an old problem, but with technology. But again, let me know your thoughts. But I'm off now, gang. I've got back-to-back shows this week because I'm off on the road. More on that story later. So a big thanks for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.